Days are cooler, nights are warmer, and I put the blame on you. Time moves slow, but my heart beats faster. When these eyes are looking right at you, right at you. You give me something to believe in, just what I needed. You're the closest.
I love authors. I think the world of folly and fiction is where our humanity is. And we don't spend enough time, I believe, in fantasy. So, I mean, outside of the fantasy of where we are now. But that's another story for another day. Let me welcome to the show. She is the co-author of Queen Charlotte. Those of you who are into the Bridgerton world, as I am, this story is amazing. And let's welcome in the author herself, Miss Julia Quinn. Welcome to the Karen Hunter Show. Hi.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Listen, the process. I've written 30 books, but they've been nonfiction. I come into it as a journalist. Where did you, first of all, when did you run into the actual Queen Charlotte of Mecklenburg?
Well, so this is really a question for Shonda. I'll be honest with you. So Queen Charlotte was not a character in the original Bridgerton novels. And the writer's room, Shonda and Chris Van Dusen, who was the original showrunner for the Netflix show, made the decision to add her, which I think was the most brilliant change ever. And she created this incredible framework for the Bridgerton world. She was the way or the mechanism by which they were able to make it a more diverse society. They went with a real historical mystery, which was Queen Charlotte of mixed race? And we know that she definitely had some African blood, but we have no idea to what degree that she actually looked as she did or anything like that. And they went with the idea of saying, okay, let's say she was, and let's say this was accepted. How would this have changed society? And they were able to create this, slightly alternate universe, which we now call the Bridgerverse, which I love. And they kind of ran with it. I mean, I knew her from history, but I was not the person who introduced her to the world of Bridgerton.
Got it. So let me just say this. For some people, it's a bridge too far to imagine this monarchy with this woman of African descent. And the notion of mixed blood, all of the blood is the same. All the blood's the same. This notion of race is made up. It's a made up construct. But why is it important in this time that we're in for people to be able to imagine folk, because the Roman Empire had African generals and leaders. I mean, Hannibal conquered a lot of Italy. That throughout time, the notion of African kingdoms, whether we're talking about Mali or Timbuktu, the dominance of Nubia into the greater Egypt that we now experience, those were all people with black skin or dark skin or, that were African descendants. Why is it so hard for people to imagine this, and why is it so important now?
Well, as to why it's so hard, I think that just speaks to the pervasive and institutional racism in our society. I think there are just a lot of people, cough Republicans, who just, sorry, I shouldn't paint them all with one brush, but they make it so easy. I think there's just a lot of people who are used to what was the status quo in American society, which just placed a certain group of people, white men, used to be landowners, at the top. And I think people are resistant to change, and to see societies that have darker skinned people in positions of power, and particularly positions of power over white people, is very difficult for them. So I think that's where that comes in, and as to why we need to see this now, for exactly the same reason, because we need people to understand that the way it was isn't going to cut it anymore. It's not okay. And, I always tell people, look, Bridgerton's not trying to tell a history lesson. We know that if Queen Charlotte was indeed of mixed race, it was something they were trying to hide. That we know. So obviously, we've already altered history a little bit with this, but the way I look at it is that, again, we're not trying to do a history lesson. We're trying to create entertainment, a romantic fantasy. And if we can create something where more people can see themselves in the story, I think that's beautiful, especially when we're letting more people see themselves inside a story that has a happy ending.
Yeah. We're talking with Julie Quinn, splendid trilogy, Linden Sisters, Agents of the Crown. And now the Bridgerton series, which is a little different because you've been pulled into a world that you didn't create. Now that we know you didn't, this is a world that was created. How much more difficult as a writer is it for you to come into something that is already landscaped as opposed to it just coming out of the recesses of your soul?
You mean for Queen Charlotte or?
For you as a
Just in
writer?
general. I didn't really have any trouble with it. I thought it was great. I grew up kind of tangentially around Hollywood, so I've always really understood the difference between film and books, and what works for one really well doesn't necessarily work that well for the other. So when I first heard from Shondaland saying they wanted to adapt the Bridgerton books, I knew it wasn't going to be a word for word adaptation, and I didn't want it to be. And I just trusted them because, I'm not going to tell Shonda Rhimes how to make television. That woman knows what she's doing. That would be a lot of hubris. And I don't know, maybe I'm atypical, but I had no trouble turning it over. I just said, take it, make it the way it needs to be for television. And they did. They did an amazing job.
Wow. So you're proud of it. Well, of course. And the money, Julia, because this is a runaway success. I didn't know how much I needed it. And, again, there's some criticism. Listen, this is a period of time where we need to be able to walk into other spaces and be free. How's this changed the trajectory of you? Did you expect this kind of response?
I never thought it was going to flop. I always thought we'd do respectably well, if only because I knew that there were millions of romance readers who were dying for something like this. I did not dream or anticipate that it was going to have the type of response it did. And I think that was just, some of it was just because, again, Shondaland produced just a gorgeous show. So everything was there on that end. And then, it came out right in the middle of the pandemic when everybody was stuck at home anyway, watching TV. And it also, came to us at this time when we were all starved for human connection. And here's the show that's about human connection. It's not about somebody getting murdered on a dark Scandinavian night or, aliens landing somewhere. It's even though it is a romantic fantasy, it's rooted in a reality that we can all kind of relate to. And everything just went right for it. So yeah, the word I use most often is surreal, to be honest with you. It's surreal.
I love it. You know what I love most about being a writer, when I used to do it, is that you could create something. People might know your name, but you can live your life.
Yes.
You can go out into the world. Even a Stephen King, who is, a household name for most of us, can pretty much go about his business, and the people aren't gonna like storm him, when he's out eating. Maybe Stephen King might get,
Yeah,
that.
he might. Yeah.
The anonymity for you, and Julia Quinn is a pen name.
It is a pen name. I originally was planning to go to medical school. In fact, I did go for a few months, and I just thought that I really needed to keep the two things separate. And so that's why I took a pen name.
So like Stacey Abrams, you're just writing to blow off steam and to exercise that other muscle in your brain, the other side of your brain.
Yeah, although, what's funny is I always plan to, I wanted to publish. I've talked to some writers who say, oh, I was just writing to see if I could. I was never writing just to see if I could. I wanted to publish this thing. I wanted to have people do it. And so I think maybe somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew that this would be a better career for me than medicine.
The first book. Okay. So you're in medical school, Harvard? Were you in Harvard Medical School?
No, I went to Yale, actually.
Okay, I'm sorry. Excuse
That's
me.
okay.
Yale
I went to
Medical
Harvard
School.
undergrad. Harvard undergrad.
Okay. And then got into Yale Medical School.
Mhm.
What were you looking, which discipline? What were you going to be
I
in?
wasn't sure. Maybe pediatrics, which again was why I thought,
Well,
keep romance separate. Anything with sex and anything with children really should be kept separate. So I was like, I better
I
take a
agree.
pen name.
I agree. I agree.
Mhm.
So what happened in those first couple of weeks that you were like, th- this is not for me.
Well, I actually deferred for a couple years. I got my first book deal the very same month I was accepted to medical school. And getting accepted to medical school is, I'm not sure people understand what a big deal it is. And I'm not speaking so much about me, but about all the amazing people who have recently been accepted. At least when I did it, and I think now only 1/3 of applicants actually get a spot anywhere. It's not like you don't get into your favorite school, you just don't get in. And so it was really exciting. It was a really awesome month. But then I thought, gosh, if I start medical school right now, I'll never be able to try writing really. So I put it off, and then I put it off again. And then I had what I call my quarter life crisis, where suddenly, all my friends were going to graduate school. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I'm not qualified to do anything, despite the fact that I was living the dream. I'd already published 3 books, but I just panicked. And so I took what I call the longest highway with the shortest on-ramp, which was to go back to medical school. The on-ramp was short because I'd already gotten in. And I was there for about 2 or 3 months before I realized this isn't the right thing for me. And it was really kind of I'm just trying, it's just really kind of a who am I, what am I doing, what's right for me thing. And I left, and I know I made the right decision because I'm married to a doctor, so I know exactly what I'm missing. And I definitely have it better.
Paul Pottinger.
Paul
Pottinger?
Pottinger, yes. Pottinger.
Pottinger. Okay. We're talking with Julie. Yes, Julia Quinn. I'm sorry.
That's
Julia
either
Quinn
one's
is
good.
here. Okay. The Bridgerton series that we love on Netflix is particularly Queen Charlotte. She has jumped in. That's not her creation, but she has brought Queen Charlotte to life. What's the difference between Queen Charlotte on the pages and Queen Charlotte on Netflix?
So Queen Charlotte, the novel, is actually a very interesting project. Um, so what you essentially have is you had the books, Bridgerton, which created a show, Bridgerton, which created another show, Queen Charlotte, which then created a book. So we did full circle. And what happened was Shonda called me up to say that Netflix wanted to do this spin-off about Queen Charlotte, which I thought was amazing and so exciting and fun and funny, because Queen Charlotte, again, was the only major character in the show who wasn't in the books, and she's the one getting her spin-off. But that's because of the great writing and also the incredible performance of Golda
Mm.
Roshable plays
Oh
her.
my goodness.
I mean,
Please
she's
say that again.
the amazing performance of Golda Roshable, who I think should get all the.
Yes.
But so anyway, so then my husband actually said to me, "You should write the book." And I'm thinking, well, I can't do that. How's that going to work? All these things. And but I suggested it to Shonda, and she said she'd kind of had that idea too. So we decided that I would take the scripts that she wrote, because she wrote the scripts. She didn't write all the scripts for Bridgerton, but she wrote the scripts herself for Queen Charlotte. And she sent them to me. There were 6. And I then adapted them into a novel. So it was kind of like reverse engineering. And it was a fascinating process, because I had about a month and a half in which I knew I was going to do this before I actually got the scripts. And so I tried to do some research on how do you do this? How do you adapt scripts into a novel? And there was nothing out there. I couldn't find a single thing. The only examples I could find was like Jaws. And so I remember thinking to myself, well, people may say I did it badly, but nobody can say I did it wrong. And so it was very interesting. And so the way it ended up is that Queen Charlotte, the novel, is much closer to the show than Bridgerton, the show, and the novels. Because I think that just naturally is what happens when you go in the reverse direction. But what you get is a deeper understanding of the characters. You now get inside the heads of 4 of the characters of the Queen, the King, Lady Danbury, and Brimsley. So now, whereas before you just saw them, you actually know what they're thinking. And also several of the scenes are expanded, so you get longer conversations between people. There are a couple scenes added. One of my favorite things that I did was the scene in which the king has his episode where he runs out into the garden in his night clothes. And it's the first time Charlotte really sees how well disturbed he is, really. I wrote that from his point of view. And so you actually get to see what he's thinking when he's having this type of break. And it was in many ways, it was like putting together a puzzle, and I really enjoyed it.
Lady Dansbury, one of my favorite characters.
She's my favorite character to write.
Okay, thank you. Because and first of all, the actress who plays her as well, amazing.
Yes.
We see her in Bridgerton.
Yes.
So that's a character you created that now, Shonda kicked forward and then broadened. What was that experience? And tell us a little bit more about your relationship to Lady Dansbury and why.
Danbury, yeah. So
Danbury,
Lady Danbury actually predates the Bridgertons in my novel. She appeared in a novel called How to Marry a Marquis, which actually was the last novel I wrote before the Bridgerton series. And she is the great aunt of the hero. And she's a pretty big character. And in the book, she's a little bit older and, a little bit, I don't want to say feeble, but I mean, she's not feeble, but she's got a cane. And I mean, she needs that cane more than Lady Danbury on the show needs the cane. And she's probably a good 20 years older, and she just says whatever the heck she wants, which is why she's so fun to write, because she just doesn't care. She's reached an age where she just has no more anything's left to give, and she says it the way she sees it. And she was just incredibly fun. And I think Shonda turned her into a little bit more of a matchmaker than she was in the books. I'm just trying to think. She's honestly so much fun to write. And so I love, the way Adjoa Andoh plays her. She's, I think, a little bit more circumspect, but still just this incredible presence and voice of authority, which is just, I don't know, it's
Now,
I would say I always forget I'm talking for radio and I make these expressions, but she's just
that's okay. People can feel it. Yes, chef's kiss to Adjoa Andoh as well. The husband, though, Lord Danbury, I thought Shonda did him really dirty. He was so disgusting, and why did he have to be that disgusting I felt like physically she made this man, who's beautiful in real life, by the way.
Yeah.
I was like, why was that necessary? How did you deal with that in the book?
So in the book, we don't actually ever meet Lady Danbury when she's that young. So we don't ever actually meet Lord Danbury. All that he's mentioned is that she said her husband was a bit of an idiot. And so I've had, over the years, many readers have written to me saying they want Lady Danbury's story. And I say, I don't really have much to work with because she said her husband was an idiot. I mean, what am I supposed to do? So Shonda was really the one who decided to make him that way. And, I think part of the reason is that, sadly, it was very realistic. Many young women were, married off without their consent/input, in these arranged marriages to these older men who were trying to, have children. And so, I don't know whether I did have Lord Danbury. That's the first marriage, because that was something I got to make up in the book, that he had not been married before. But they just, these want these young, quote unquote, fertile women, and they were just kind of bartered like livestock. And so I think, I can't really speak for Shonda, but the way I understand it is that, it's just showing, we wanted to show her journey from being essentially chattel and like a broodmare into really coming into her own power. And so it really had to show that where she started, she might have been had money and clothes and beautiful things, but she had no power at all, and how she seized it, really.
For you, Julia Quinn is here, by the way, co-author of Queen Charlotte, along with Shonda Rhimes. The TV series is the continuation of Bridgerton. It is a phenomenon. Reading Shonda Rhimes' script, what did you learn about her as a writer, as a thinker, as a creator?
Oh, it was fascinating because, like everybody else on the planet, I've seen Grey's Anatomy, and even though she's writing the script that's set hundreds of years ago, you could still see Shonda in there, just the snappy dialogue. And, she'll put things in the stage directions so that you as the viewer are not going to see, but it's in the stage directions, which are so funny. And just like, there's one thing where she was like, "'Cause time's up, folks," and so you can see the modern sensibilities in the stage directions, the snappy dialogue. So there's all that. But honestly, I felt I learned the most about Shonda when I read her book, The Year of Yes, which was her memoir, which was, I found, incredibly personal and really inspiring. And I would encourage anybody to go pick that up. It's a really great memoir. It's worth it for the price alone. The price alone is worth it for her graduation speech that she gave to Dartmouth, which was how the whole thing began. She was invited to give a commencement speech at Dartmouth, and she was talking with her sister, and she says, "Oh, I'm not going to do it." And her sister said, "You never say yes to anything." And so she decided she was going to say yes for 1 year to the things that scared her. And it's really incredible.
Did you read that before this relationship?
I read it
Or was
because
that part of your research? Yeah.
that was part of my research when I found out, they were, when we were contacted by Shondaland saying we want to, adapt her books. I was thinking I better learn more about her. I mean, I knew who she was, of course, everybody does. I said, but I thought, well, this is a great way to learn more about this person. And it was amazing.
What did you learn as a writer? And what have you incorporated for your next books, or if anything?
Well, I've been taking a little bit of time off from writing. I've been digging more into advocacy right now. I'm the national ambassador for Every Library, and so I've been doing a lot of work fighting book.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm very, very concerned about the rise in censorship and book banning in this country, and so I've been focusing a bit more on that. What have I learned as a writer? Just the economy of words. When you look at a script, it's a very different thing than a novel. And I think you have to choose your words. In some ways, you have to choose them even more carefully because you have fewer of them, and fewer that are actually going to reach the audience word for word. But then with books, you have to choose them very, very carefully because there are more of them and everyone needs to count. So it's just, I don't know. For a writer, you'd think I'd be able to put this into words better, but this may be why I don't write books about writing.
This is perfect, though. I mean, because there are people listening. We do a whole series. I talk with a lot of authors because I think we're unfortunately moving away, which is why I'm glad you're advocating for books and libraries. I feel like the soul of society really goes through books and people being literate and reading and loving to read, especially young people. That to me is the foundation of society. We're losing that. I feel like we have access to more information than ever before, and we're more ignorant than we've ever been, and we're less thoughtful and we're less empathetic. And to me, it all ties to reading. There's the Harry Potter phenomenon. I don't know what is driving young people to the bookstores and to the libraries to just spend the summers, as I did, engulfed in books, but it's sad to me where we are. So I think it's super important.
Well, actually, studies have shown that young people are actually reading a lot, which makes me happy. Not enough of them. I want everybody to be reading a lot, but it's not as dire as we'd think, except that now you have all these governments and supposedly concerned parents trying to limit what is accessible to them. And it's just infuriating because, when you have these, sorry, I get very fired up about this, but it's so important to have these books in the library that allow these teenagers, I mean, all kids, but I'm speaking about teenagers right now, to see themselves. And for example, the vast majority of books that are being challenged in school libraries feature queer characters or themes about queer characters. And, you know, if your kid isn't gay or non-binary, reading a book about it is not going to make them gay or non-binary. But reading a book about it might make them a nicer person. It might make them a more empathetic person. You know, I think back to when I was in high school, and I'm 54, so this is the late 80s. And, you know, we used to throw around the word gay like an insult. And it never even occurred to us how hurtful this was. And I'd like to think that if there had been books for me to pick up, because you didn't write about gay teenagers at that time, it just wasn't accepted. But I'd like to think that if I'd had books about that, it would have humanized, you know, gay teens in a way that I just wasn't aware of. And I might have understood that I was really hurting somebody when I did that and when we all did that. And that there probably were, I mean, there certainly were gay kids in my high school class that were closeted because, again, everybody was. And so, you know, having the representation works in two ways. It will help, you know, the kid who will see themselves and be like, okay, I'll get through this. I understand I'm not alone. And then also for people, say like me, who are, you know, white, cis, hetero, all those things, to understand that there are people not like us and that we need to be more careful and kinder. And these so-called, you know, Moms for Liberty, which frankly, I think is a hate group, are going in and trying to remove this. And I think they're going to make the world a much unkinder and more and a crueler place.
I couldn't agree more. My frustration comes in. I don't know. I don't see it changing anytime soon. And I'd like
Well,
to think that it will. I mean, I want to be as optimistic as you are. You know, I don't even see, even if the studies are saying young people are reading more, I don't see it manifesting in in society. But you know, maybe we're in a period now with the protests on all fronts. Maybe something's awakening. Maybe I don't know what's going to happen in our election cycle. Maybe that will spark something because you don't know what's going to be the tipping point
yeah.
into change. But
Well, what I'd like to say to the listeners is that what's really important, if you care as much as I do about protecting our right to read freely, you need to speak up, because what's happening is that the people who are trying to ban books and who are challenging books all over the place, it's actually not many people. It's a very small number of people, but they're loud. And they show up and they go to every school board meeting and they spend their time like challenging the books all the time. And so what you need to do is you need to show up to make sure that the school board understands that the other side is bigger and that there are more people who care about keeping these books in the libraries. And one way that you can be aware of these things, actually, if you go to my website, there's a page called Advocacy, which can lead you. I have a petition with every library. And if you sign it, you will give them your zip code, and then they can notify you if there's something going on in your area that you can then, you know, show up at and get up to the microphone and say, this is not okay with me. You can restrict your child's right to read, but you can't restrict mine. And so it's really important that we show up for all those things, and also really important that we vote up and down the ballot. You know, certainly the very top of our ballot, I firmly believe it's, you know, our entire democracy is on the line with the choice that we have coming up. But going all the way down to your local representatives and your state representatives and your school board members, these are really important too. And you gotta vote if you care about these things. And please do.
Amen. Julia Quinn on the rights. Man, listen, I knew I was gonna like you because most writers, I haven't really met too many, particularly fiction writers, particularly folk that write about, you know, love and optimism and stuff. You know, that comes, you gotta have that in you. You gotta have that in you to be able to produce it at the level. 17 New York Times bestsellers in a row. I mean, people are inspired by you. I can't let you go without finding out what you did with the $79,000 that you won on the weakest link. I cannot. 79,000. What was the question that landed you? Because you are not the weakest link.
I was not the weakest link. That was
No.
the second most amazing moment of my life. Well, okay. fourth because I had two kids between that and the call from Shonda. So the question was, it was like, what is the name of an architectural style, meaning like house in the Bengali style? And it was bungalow.
Why did you know that?
Well, I lived in a bungalow, but also I think she really wanted me to win because she was just like a house in the Bengali style. She just really pronounced it for me. But I did kind of wait, you know, what they don't, the first round, you have to go really fast. When you're in the final round, you could take as much time as you want. And so I really kind of thought about that and thought about that. But what I did with the money, I actually took, I think, $10,000 off the top, and I gave $1,000 to my siblings and my cousins each. And then after that, it all went toward buying a house, and the one I'm sitting in right now, actually.
That's a beautiful, and she's got nice wainscoting in the
Oh yeah,
no,
yeah.
no, what do you call it? The crown molding. And
Yep.
it's yes, yeah, okay, not wainscoting.
And
Crown
actually,
molding, nice deck. I see that off the side. Beautiful.
I
Yes.
had to, what's really funny, I still can't believe they lent me the money to buy this house, but when we were applying for the mortgage, I had a letter from NBC saying that this money was coming, and that actually went into my mortgage file. Game show winning.
Crazy.
I know, what's
That's crazy. That's crazy. You're living a life, ma'am. You're living a life, one that shows that when you follow your heart, you good things happen. You know, medical school wasn't in the cards, but this, I feel like the healing you provide with those words on those pages makes you a doctor.
Oh
So
my God,
I am
that's so sweet. Thank you.
grateful to meet you. More Bridgerton. What's you're taking some time off, but I know we're gonna stay in touch, Julia Quinn. So come
I am
on
here
back
for
when
you
you're ready.
anytime.
All right. Julia Quinn, Queen Charlotte, co-author. Get the book. It's out.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I run my fingers through her hair as she smiles and says that she loves me. Isn't it lovely when the one you're lusting is the one